Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another grounded video. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys why I don't think that Wendell is the big bad guy in the game. A lot of people are theorizing that Wendell is the one that caused all this. He's kidnapping the teens. He's doing all these research and experiments on them. But Wendell is not the bad guy, and we're going to show you why. So let's jump into it. So the first thing we need to know is why I think Wendell is not the bad guy. And we're going to jump into that by talking to burg.l here. So we can see that burg.l obviously knows that Dr. Wendell Tully has the recipe for the embiggening cocktail. So if he's trying to do all this research and experimentation on these young kids, why would he be trying to allow them to return to be bigger? Or is he just trying to help himself be bigger after the spacer got broken? But I think he's actually trying to do good by making everybody able to get rid of the de-shrunken or the expanding process, basically. So he has the Dr. Wendell Tully right here, is the only person with the information on the embiggening cocktail. We're going to jump into it here too as well. You look at all the labs here and you click on these, it basically just tells you the location of labs, except for one right here, the Hayes lab. The Hayes lab, it doesn't tell you where it is, it's going to tell you what Dr. Wendell Tully was up to at the Hayes lab. We click on it. Dr. Tully was interested in medicinal properties of fungus and molds at the shrunken scale. That to me does not sound like somebody who's going to be a big bad evil mad scientist if he's looking for medicinal properties of the fungus and molds at the shrunken scale. And I know you guys can't see that because of my camera, but that's what it says there. So with that being said, we also know a few other things that I want to point out. So burg.l, we know, has this kill switch. That is not to kill humans. A lot of the tasties and everything in the yard were programmed for guard duty and stuff like that. Guard duty from the insects or guard duty from other people that were shrunken. I don't think that kill switch is for the kids. I don't think it's for humans. I think it's literally just for insects. Because obviously being shrunken, they know that they have a lot of insects here. He talks about the broodmother in the hedge, a lot of the other orb weaver juniors and everything being in the hedge lab. So that kill switch is basically for self-defense mode for him and to protect Dr. Tully himself. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the data here. And we're going to start here with this ominous log number 1. So we're going to go back a little bit of the history and learn about Dr. Wendell Tully as a person, and then we'll get into what he's actually doing and my theory on why he's not the big bad guy at the end. And as we go through it, you'll see as to the different reasons why I think that. Today's gluon trials were a complete failure, so we're already leading off with Dr. Tully and knowing that his experiment here with the gluon trials, complete failure. We have more going down the road later. Years research down the raid, nothing is working, not the gluon, not the scabby, not even the confounded napkin bags. And this is where we start talking about the spacer, the shrink machine. What if he goes back and revisits it? So he knows initial exploration has been promising before Hubert put the kibosh on it. What does he have to lose, right? So we get into number 2 here, and this is where he actually has it complete. The prototype is complete, the spacer. He needs to go to sleep. Trudy's gone to bed, but he wants to know if all these months of work were worth it. So he tries it, explosions, complete failure, another scientific experiment gone. So then we have some more time go by, and we know that the spacer is operational now. He has shrunken the set of basic plastic polyhedral dice that he was planning on giving Thor for Christmas. I believe it was Christmas, yeah. And he has shrunken them to a much smaller size than they already were. So we know that it works now. So now, this is interesting right here. So now we're getting into the side effects of the spacer. We see right here, a non-trivial number of particles are not being conserved. I have observed no ill side effects, but making a note to check that later. So this goes into the demonstration for Ominent once he gets that. And then we talk about what this non-trivial number of particles actually is. Go down here, he's telling burg.l to make a note of it, and then right down here, another thing right here, Dr. Klein being dismissive of his breakthroughs, and he's talking about how he can solve world hunger, overpopulation, global warming, all with this shrinking technology. Again, does not sound like somebody who's just a big bad evil mad scientist trying to kill kids or other people that are shrunken in the backyard. So now we talk about the demonstration that Ominent wants, and obviously because of Klein talking about it. So he's going to tell them that everything he's looking for right here, what I've been working towards my entire career, recognition at last. And then obviously we don't have any information from this one yet. And then we're going to get into the audio logs here from burg.l. I don't think so. The notes right here, the Muscle Sprouts Test Kitchen is our first note that we're looking at here. And I'm going to read through this real quick, and then I'm going to bring up the Pond Lab whiteboard, just kind of give you guys a little image that we need to look at for this. So ingredient assessment. Test samples are currently 0.833% of target production size. And that 833 is interesting because that's 1/10 of the time in minutes it takes for light to travel from the sun to the Earth's surface. So you get a little Easter egg right there, a little science Easter egg if you guys are into that. I thought it was cool, but let's move on. So now we're talking about just trying to make these mussel sprouts edible. Obviously he has burg.l, but they're not coming out too great. They're tasting like onions. Now I want to bring up the Pond Lab note here that I have. Or the Pond Lab whiteboard. If you guys can see this, hopefully everything's working. So now we see that this is where he's talking about the onions. He's working on these mussel sprouts, 0.83333%. They're growing, but they're not growing fast enough, and we'll get into all that later. It's going to talk about a lot of different information that it's kind of hard to explain, but I'll do my best once we get to that point. So this is basically just all the muscular mussel sprout test kitchen and everything like that we're getting into. You can see that we're trying to make it food, but he also has another use for it. So now let's jump into the notes here. Another little Easter egg here that I thought was interesting. So the hedge password for the lab here, we have this. You find the 4 pieces and you can see what they all have something written on them. This one is scribbled T19, and you can see that I thought it was just plus 19. So the first one being your, Y-O-U-R, that's what I thought, plus 1958. It's actually T19, and this is 58. So if you look at this one being a T, we can go ahead and take a look at the one that would be next to it. T, we have R, U, and then this is a D right here. And then this one obviously has a Y on it. So the password is basically Trudy backwards 1958. Now that's my theory about maybe it's their anniversary. It's his way of remembering their anniversary. We know the game takes place in the mid to late 80s basically, so this would put their marriage at about 30 years, which puts him, Wendell Tully's age, at about late 40s, early 50s. Just a little note right there that I thought was interesting. Alright, now we're getting into the logs here. This is where Dr. Tully's talking about how he's now substituting at the local high school, and he's actually teaching physics here because scalar and a vector, that's a physics talk where they basically just have different directions. Right here, if it has a direction that's scalar or vector, blah blah blah, whatever. Klein works there, another former co-worker of his. And we talk about this one too. So he comes back to restart the spacer development, but he has to figure out how to return shrunk objects to their original size. And this again, we go back to the those particles that were non-observant or whatever, the non-trivial particles. He's talking about it again right here. Almost certain that irregularities are responsible for the failure during the demonstration. See, so he addressed this earlier when he said to make a note of it during the demonstration for Ominent. Perhaps that demonstration goes a lot better, and Ominent keeps him on and continues his research. But he doesn't, so now the demonstration failed for Ominent, and now he's back to trying to figure out why. And then we get to raw science. So I've isolated the source of the particle irregularities. I mess up that word every time. They appear to be a byproduct of the shrinking process. If I adjust the machine to account for their existence, it should be the key to de-shrinking expanding process. So the irregular covalent SNPI-42Z particle traces, and this is where he renames those extra particles basically right there, raw science. So now he's talking about raw science. We have the medicinal properties of fungus and molds on a shrunken level, and the mussel sprouts. All 3 things right here that he's doing research on. That doesn't sound like he's just a mad scientist. He's trying to do good in the world. So none of this, he's not doing any of that. So now we're going to jump into the field station notes right here, and number 1 being right here. So we talk about Sarah throwing the frisbee into the in the backyard. It hits off the fence and then lands in the hedge, destroying the hedge lab for them. We talk about her, she's going to be an Olympian or destroyer of worlds. Thor, on the other hand, we know Thor is the quote-unquote nerdy guy who's playing Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Sarah is more the athletic type. Now we talk about the zip line, so we're going to get into the reboot right here. So this is talking about the surveyor system that was introduced in the Into the Wood update, and how he's getting interference signals, basically trying to kind of, I guess, figure out what's going on these frequencies that he's using for the surveyor. We can see right here, he starts using the tasties, not used for guard duty, to go out there and harvest targets in the yard. I'm guessing that's some of the resources we see in the pond lab, up in the hedge lab, all the different resources on the shelves and everything, as well as the black ant lab. Units for field acquisition are showing increased signs of wear and tear, rust being the most prevalent. Right here, 19 unknown radio signals were spotted during the reboot process. Points of origin were not at fixed locations. That rules out the kids, Sarah and Thor, and Mr. Henderson, a potential neighbor or something like that. So if the points of origin from the unknown radio signals were in a static area, just one area, like from the house, he would know that it was possibly Sarah or Thor trying to figure it out, or Mr. Henderson, a neighbor. All signs point to Ominent. So this is where Ominent knows that his space or his shrinking technology is working, and now they want to get it from him. So increasing security protocols on all lab facilities, which would be the tasties that used for guard duty, and installing biometric scanners where needed. So the biometric scanners were introduced with the Bug Strike Back update. We get that on the Scabby that we get from burg.l. That's why we throw our hand on there and it reads our hand and we're able to get access to the labs. So we know that Ominent Practical Technologies is the one trying to listen in on his conversations and get technological information from him. Then we're going to go to the, we have here the control room note. Right here. So now we're talking about moving from the Hedge lab over to the Haze lab, him and burg.l. So he has the Ominent issue NP100 respirator to aid him on that little adventure. Locking down the Hedge lab, very peculiar timestamps on recent data retrieval attempts. Again, not Sarah, not Thor, not Mr. Henderson. It's Ominent. We don't need prying eyes becoming prying fingers. We have that, and now we're going to jump into phase 3 results here. So now we're in the Haze lab, and this is where he's using his technology to try to figure out some medicinal properties of the fungus and molds in the Haze lab, and he's testing them on the local insects. Mutations in phase 3 are progressing at a rate I can't begin to qualify, and they've spread to the local fauna. So maybe he wasn't testing on them actually. He's trying to use the fungus and molds for their medicinal properties, and due to the infection spread, it's affecting the insects around here. So he can't express the sorrow he feels for these simple creatures, warped and manipulated into ravenous, horrible, exploding beings. Attempts to reverse or even slow the changes in the strange spores the creature has spread to haven't been fruitful. Again, introducing security defense procedures to keep the Haze lab safe. Catastrophic as it may be, his confidence in raw science as a catalyst for growth and change is sealed now. So this is where he's trying to figure out a way to basically reverse the shrinking process to get everybody or people to turn big again. So from phase 3, we're going to jump into the hams test day 1 right here. So now we're looking at the, the hydroponic aquaculture microponic system, hams, where he's trying to utilize this with the medicinal properties of the fungus and molds and the mussel sprouts themselves to basically make them better people to survive the backyard, as well as a way to get rid of the shrinking process and get them back to normal. So he talks about the using the biodome, cultivating the biodome mycelium network, which is basically the roots, the whole root structure of a plant or a tree. So you have all the little roots that come out, all the little ones, all the big ones, and everything go out. Signals are detectable in all extremities. So the whole mycelium network, he's detecting signals in, which is a good thing. You can see right here, fungal network active, surprisingly. Typically, the harvesting is typically 90 days out, but initial tests show small sprouts are ready within the span of a week. So now we're going to get into trying to condense the harvesting rate at which he can produce these mussel sprouts. Look to optimize that further, keeping in mind a certain level of structural integrity is required to scale them up to nearly a grapefruit size. So trying to make them bigger and better. And we're going to go into hams test day 7. Nominal growing results, not even marginally different from initial pretest runs. Nitrogen cycle levels remain optimal. Local fungal network appears robust. Brussels sprouts seem slightly loose and fairly limp. And this is where he's going to get into how can we make them mature faster? Well, by getting them worked out. Other phalangeal observations. Trudy finds her ring better suited for the koi pond substrate than her hand. So obviously something's going on in their marriage. He's spending way too much time in the research and experiments that he's doing, not paying much attention to his wife. So she throws the wedding ring in the pond, and that's why we have Trudy to the Sankey koi fish down there. After day 7, we're going to go over to day 15. No change from last week, but feel we're on the cusp of something here. He's got an idea. So this is where he talks about using the fitness infomercials that you see in the pond lab around the mussel sprouts where they're growing to basically get them working a lot harder. And that's what he's doing. But also we get into the a little bit of a darker side here, vascular grafting. So this is where he's starting to talk about using these mussel sprouts on humans, using humans as test subjects here. We've removed the cumbersome stem from the growth process, rendering these axillary buds longing for a new system to be a part of. So you cut the stem off, basically, and everything else is still moving around. He's had burg.l harvest the appendicular artery off the old jarred appendix. So vascular grafting, if you look into it, the appendicular artery is actually one of the arteries that they use for grafting to promote tissue growth, and basically combating damage from tissue damage. Begun splicing them into the sprout roots. So now you're taking the sprout roots and connecting them to the appendicular artery of this old human jarred appendix. So we know it's human, because then he goes on to say the systems of both man and plant are not that different after all, but could they be this compatible? Interesting now that we now get into the testing on humans here. Then we're going to go into here where he talks about Generation 7 fitness table. Vascular systems have evolved into something inspirational. Sprout musculature amplification research is going swimmingly. Generation 4 being taught the rhythm of the flesh in a way the fungal networks could transmit was certainly key. So now he talks about using that music, the fitness infomercial music, throughout the fungal network to transmit it basically to the axillary buds that he talked about earlier, is making them produce and grow a lot quicker. Condensed crop cycle manipulation is accelerating generational hybrid evolution at an unprecedented rate. Each node is performing in tandem at peak efficiency. HAMS is proving to be a highly advantageous apparatus. Super dense Brussels sprouts, muscle sprouts, conducting a ripe symphony of proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates via the push and pull of plant and muscle fibers. The applications here for sustainable, humane, omnivorous diets are tantalizing. Then he talks about the aerobics program for the lab monitor array to increase nitrification, introduce a motivational aspect of growth. Blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to get into, after day 36, we're going to jump into day 91. So this is where he's talking about the introduction to Mouthtown and how he talks to them about the product, and they basically just want to use it as something to eat at the breakfast table. But we have failure once again. So trying to condense the growing cycle too much to grow the product a lot faster is going too much. So product candidate generation 21 cannot be scaled without catastrophic side effects. Dialing back to generation 9's parameter set to find a path forward. So we're taking a step back. Mouthtown wants them just at the breakfast table. Then he talks about if only the sprouts survived the scaling process the way the earlier generations had. But this is where it gets interesting. It's a shame that cellular maturity is required for the sprouts to become viable as a product, but something about reaching advanced biological age is incompatible with the expanding process. So, is it purely because the tissue damage / regrowth cycle is on a substantially compressed timeline? They'd be not much older than myself if converted to human chronological age, and I haven't experienced effects such as this. So, the individual that he's been testing on is himself, and we know from the, we're going to get to the Hayes Lab whiteboard right here. He's done testing on Trudy, Thor, Sarah, and himself. And you look at the early test phases from the base, phase 1, phase 2, all the way to phase 3, and in between phase 2 and phase 3 is the sweet spot. We can see that here. Trudy's not liking it, so Trudy basically stops before phase 2. Thor is just not having a good time with it. Sarah, we have no idea. So he continues testing on himself. B plus, A minus, A plus is the sweet spot. That's what he's looking for, because you see after that into phase 3, he goes down to a C, potentially talking about some of the side effects that he said he wasn't experiencing. Maybe now he is. And you can see here, small, medium, large, they're growing bigger. So he's basically able to grow them quicker on that condensed cycle. What he's missing out on is that cellular maturity. So it's basically, if you think of Ninja Turtles 2 Secret of the Ooze, how Toka and Razor got the ooze, so they grew big and they got muscular and everything, but they were still had the brains of kids. Similar concept here. So he's growing these muscle sprouts. They're bigger, they're plumped up, they're stronger and everything, but they don't have that cellular maturity. So he's trying to figure out a way to advance the cellular maturity as well as the growth cycle itself. So he's been doing this testing on himself, and we can see that obviously from the individual in the trailer here that we see. This is my theory that this is Dr. Wendell busted out his BVDs here, testing on himself with the muscle sprouts, and then basically mutating himself right here. Obviously, he's not going to notice it as side effects if he doesn't feel it as being a negative thing to him. He could potentially see this as a bonus, a positive side effect. We don't know what the red is. Maybe that's just some Might Fuzz armor he created or something like that. But my theory is that this is Dr. Wendell. He knows now that it's successful, but it wasn't successful on Trudy, Sarah, and Thor, or possibly some of the other shrunken people that have been tested on. And he's trying to create the embiggening cocktail to get everybody else de-shrunk, as well as still trying to find a solution to use the muscle sprouts, the medicinal properties of the fungus and mold, potentially to reverse these side effects, or to basically come up with a viable option of the muscle sprouts going forward. So that is my theory on the idea that Dr. Wendell Tully is not the bad guy. He's the one to help us. He knows what he's doing. He's trying to solve world hunger, overpopulation, global warming. He feels bad about what happened to the insects in the yard from the mutations. He's just a guy who made some mistakes along the way, and he's trying to get recognized for the good stuff that he's doing in the world. So that's all I got for this video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. We'd love to have you join the community. Link to join the Discord in the description, where we talk everything grounded base builds, theories like this, and the feature updates coming out with the potential for full release in September. So with that being said, everybody, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and as always, stay original, my friends. We'll see you guys in the next video. Later.